Hello, this is Curt Pringle. Thank you for tuning into Talking Issues. Today, I kind of want to start a little different because I want to talk about communication, and I probably need to hone my skill in communication. And when you think about it, teaching communications in a department in a university, you might think about journalism or marketing or traditional ways of communication, but the field of communication has changed so much. And today I have an expert in that. My friend, Dr. Lisa Sparks, who is a professor at Chapman University, author of over 130 papers, 13 books, really an astute teacher scholar. But one of her claims to fame is the creation a few years back of the School of Communications at Chapman University. So let's talk about that. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Is that an acceptable introduction?
Yeah, I love it.
So you've been a professor now for over 19 years at Chapman, and you have a history from George Mason University and University of Texas, San Antonio. I know you've been a professor in that realm. But coming to Chapman and establishing a school of communications, why'd you do that?
Yeah. Well, when I first arrived 19 years ago, it was a very different place. The whole university was a very different place, as local folks know. And now we have a national reputation. But back then, really, it wasn't like a traditional department of communication that you would see at other universities at all. It had people doing theater on the stage. There was really no behavioral social science being done, which the majority of our field really was engaged in that practice. So over time, hiring faculty, strengthening programs, building undergraduate programs, bridge programs to the master's program, which I built early on in 2007, the master's program in strategic and health and strategic communication that spun out of public health from the newly formed College of Science back then. And so actually I was teaching out of the College of Science in the early days.
Yeah.
And then we had the bridge program from public health, health sciences undergraduate degrees to the graduate Master of Science in Health and Strategic Communication. Did that for a while. And then eventually we were ready to spin off from the Wilkinson College of Arts and Sciences, where the Department of Communication was held, into creating our own school because of the undergraduate programs that we had created in strategic and corporate communication, which became wildly popular, and then additional undergraduate programs in global languages and communication and so forth. So interestingly, Chapman still has journalism, but it's actually housed under the Department of English rather than in communication, whereas at most universities, journalism is in a school of communication.
Yeah. But with this is fascinating to me, and we've talked quite a bit about it, and that is you talk about degrees in health and strategic communication. So health, behavioral sciences as a part of communication. So it's not just how do I learn the skills of communicating messages, but what you have done is messages in certain professions and in certain skill areas. So you can talk differently or communicate messages or healthcare information to patients or doctors or others within that field. Is that
exactly? So just to sum it, to make it really easy to understand,
I need that. Yeah.
There's a continuum of communication from the interpersonal side on one continuum. That would be patient-provider interaction type of environments, teacher-student communication, coach, athlete communication, anything that involves interpersonal communication, what we're doing right now in a way.
Right.
But this is a little bit of a hybrid because we're also on media. So there's a media component. And then you go down the continuum to family communication, to organizational communication, where you add more team members to it, environment, to mediated communication and mass communication on the other end of the continuum, those public communication environments. So that's kind of the core of the field in a lot of ways. And that's
so the field covers all of that.
All of that.
So with your expertise in public health and communication within public health, it can go from that full gamut. How does a doctor express to the patient the illness, the recovery plan, all of that stuff? But it also could be publicly presenting public health information to a media organization.
Exactly. Or even in entertainment media, which I've done some consulting with the entertainment industry on how are they depicting health messages on these health shows like Grey's Anatomy, and there are so many of them.
You told me that, and so how does a TV production that's built on entertainment where you interact with health, how does it present messages when most people who are watching that TV show for entertainment,
Yeah.
they think they're getting medical advice?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit tricky. So
Yeah,
that's why that
right.
was really fun to do when I'm able to engage in that practice, because I'm able to sort of guide and advise a little bit on, can we get it close to the science? Because people watching the show are making health decisions based on things that they're watching on TV, which is pretty powerful and a little bit frightening. Um, but what
But
I
they do, right?
yeah,
I mean, Marcus Welby, MD. I mean, I remember watching that
yeah,
show, and when I was a kid, even in I think there was black and white period, so there was a black and white TV period of Marcus Welby. But the point is that people are talking about the great aspect of medicine being talked about on TV, but the drawback is, are they getting medical advice and not going to a doctor or thinking
yep. And now we're seeing it in social media as well, right?
Is that right?
This whole new sort of new medium. I mean, it's not so new anymore. Now we're moving social media and it's spreading into things like Chat GPT and AI, and it's continues to be the Wild West. So communication's a part of all of those environments. And so that's why when we go back to the first question about schools of communication and how they're developed, the time at which we developed the School of Communication in 2016, there were 55 other schools of communication across the nation. Now there are more, but it's not one size fits all. Some
Right.
merged out of schools of journalism, some merged out of English, some merged out of behavioral sciences, psychology, and some merged out of theater arts. And so that's why at different universities, you'll see different conglomerations of schools of communication journalism, like you have at USC or like at Cal State Fullerton, where everything's all together. But
Right.
at Chapman, we're still smaller. And so, because historically you've got a film school that emerged in a different way than this the more social and behavioral sciences approach
Right.
of the School of
So let's get to that in a few minutes. But from your professional background, you did was it CDC or NIH or
Yeah, the National Institutes of Health. I was a cancer communication science fellow in 2002.
see when you told me that I thought that is so interesting because a specific as it relates to cancer, how to present and discuss those issues with patients, but also um, kind of the doctor relationship. How do you educate a doctor on certain communication skills? I mean,
Exactly.
where is that realm of expertise? I mean, what do you try to accomplish there?
So what I try to accomplish is, really studying the theory and research behind health messaging. And that can often, I come from an interpersonal communication viewpoint and draw on theories of interpersonal communication to guide those research questions and hypotheses that we're testing in these environments. So how does a physician or health provider talk to someone from a different culture? How do they,
Nice.
what are the cultural aspects that they need to consider? How do you talk to someone who's a different age group? How do you talk to someone who has a very advanced diagnosis versus someone who's got something that's more preventative? So all these things make a huge difference. How does that a health provider talk to other members of the healthcare team? So it's not only the patient, but also when we add a family member, how do those dynamics play out? Because you might be talking with someone who's pretty frail older adult, and they have a caregiver with them who's really helping to make those decisions and maybe leading a lot of those decisions. So you have to figure out how to talk to those different audiences, but they're kind of an entity, and there might be conflict there that you have to consider, right? So there's a science of messaging that I try to equip health providers with so that they can be the best version of themselves when they find themselves in an environment like that, where they're breaking bad news of a cancer diagnosis, for example, or they have medical adherence, which involves relational aspects as well as persuasive aspects. How do we get people to do the protocol that we're assigning them to do
Right.
for their own good? Think about the smoking cessation campaigns of the 80s,
Right.
right? We were trying to get people, and California led the way with that, by the way. So, you don't see a lot of people smoking in the way you did back in the 80s in California, but you go to the East Coast or you go to parts of Europe, people are still smoking away despite all the knowledge.
Right. Well, yeah, and the knowledge probably is globally accepted knowledge to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's just how certain people have responded to it, or it was presented to them, right?
Yeah, and just choices that we make. I mean,
Yeah, right.
we might know something's not so great for us, but we want to engage in it anyway because it gives us certain kinds of pleasure,
Right.
or there are social aspects to it, or
Right.
So I can just give people the information, and then people are going to, behave in the way that they're going to behave. But hopefully you can slowly move that needle.
So if communications purposes have kind of evolved, right? How to present certain message. I mean, what have you learned? Where do you see some of that change or that evolution of communicating serious messages and things like that? Are there new skills or are there new ways to present that?
Well, yeah. I mean, with the advent of social media, putting out all sorts of information, right? And the labeling of that is changing and shifting from, what makes disinformation? Who gets to decide that? What makes malinformation? Who gets to decide that?
Right.
And how that plays out in the health field can make a difference in people's decision making, right? So that is really still the Wild West and changing the way that we kind of approach health messaging. And so that requires just more and more research. And continuing to ask those research questions in these new environments and seeing how it plays out. So that's what makes it kind of fun, is it's always an evolving environment, and there are always new questions to be researching and answering.
So your history though comes from the health side,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
And health communication side. I do think it's kind of fascinating in terms of the whole strategic and corporate communication, and what makes up that discipline. I know you have the undergraduate degree at Chapman in that specific area.
So that's grounded in a lot of the same kinds of theories, but a little bit more grounded on the persuasive side of that continuum that I just sort of described. And so I described that continuum, and then there are contexts of communication where we study from these different angles. So I was talking about interpersonal communication. You can study that in a context of health, or in a context of intercultural, cross-cultural communication,
Right.
or in a context of instructional communication in teacher-student interaction, or you can study it from a media or persuasive angle. So, for example, I teach courses in First Amendment, particularly freedom of speech, that aspect of the First Amendment, and persuasive campaigns. And I have the students learn about aspects of freedom of speech, and then they learn, all the different aspects of freedom of speech. We unpack all of that. And then I teach them how to do persuasive campaigns from an evidence-based perspective. And so at the end, they have to take a side and take a stand on some context of freedom of speech and build a whole persuasive campaign around it, from, really understanding your audience, doing audience analysis, researching that audience, doing formative research on that target audience, and then creating message design that's specified to that target audience to change their attitude toward whatever angle the student wants.
How to even make them receptive to your arguments.
Well, and first understanding what freedom of speech really is.
Right.
And I think we talked earlier that Chapman University has a very strong stand on freedom of speech, and getting people to understand that hate speech is free speech as much as we don't like it, right? And the difference is, you can say, oh, Italians smell, generally speaking, if you're talking about a group of Italians. But then if it moves into a harassment when you attack a particular Italian because you smell, and that's where the issues arise around freedom of speech. That's where the line is sort of drawn when it becomes harassment.
Well, but see, I think that's good. I mean, we could take a pause in the discussion of the School of Communications and just talk about Chapman University, one of the, if not the oldest schools established that now is in Orange County, came from Orange County from LA County, established in the 1800s, and came here to its campus in Orange in the late 1930s, I think.
Yeah,
something
we're
about
150 plus years old.
Isn't that crazy? Named after the first mayor of the city of Fullerton. So truly now an Orange County institution. And how many students are at
We have
Chapman
10,000 students, right around 10,000 students, about 8,500 undergraduates, and then the rest are graduate students that are housed not only in some of our programs in Orange, but many of those graduate students are in our campus in Irvine.
Yes.
In the health sciences.
And right here in the Platinum Triangle in Anaheim at the end of the block, that building used to be known as the Catella Grand, but the entire apartment building was bought by Chapman University, and now it's called Chapman Grand, even though it's on Catella.
Yeah.
For the purpose of, I think, first-year students or
First 2 years.
first 2 year students. And they make a deal so they don't bring their cars to campus or something, and you have shuttle buses that
Yeah.
bring them back and
We
forth.
have shuttle buses, so that really helps the city of Orange. It help, we're growing, right?
Right.
So, but our intent is to be sort of capped at this number around 10,000. It's a good size. It's a really good size.
Right.
It's about double the size from when I arrived in 2006. But students, like, you want that sweet spot where it's
Right.
not too large, where you don't know anybody, but it's not too small where you know everybody.
Right. And part of that is, I think universities last year faced a tremendous challenge as we were approaching the subject on freedom of speech, and a lot of on-campus riots and protests and challenges all around, be it Gaza, Palestinian issues, and certainly regarding Israel and Jewish issues. I know Chapman had some of those challenges on campus.
We did. But our stance on freedom of speech is we want people to be able to express themselves.
Right.
Very, very important. As long as you're not breaking the law, as long as you're not harassing.
So
particular
that line of freedom of speech is say what you want, but don't target an individual with hateful speech. So where is that line though? If an individual says, "I want to eliminate your race," is that how is that not targeting? But it is presented to the entire race when you're that direct. And some people were using those kind of words through the protests of last year.
Right. And so you can protest to the group at large, right? In its hate speech, and you may not like it. I mean, I don't like it personally, but people want to express them. Some of my former students were there, expressing themselves, and I welcome that. That's how they learn. That's how they learn. The difference is when you're attacking an individual, right? On who they are. And that's when it becomes harassment. We didn't have any of that. Thankfully, our leaders were really very good at communicating every day with the students, building relationships with them, asking them how they were doing. And then, as long as they weren't destroying any property, it was okay for a period of time.
Right.
And
no occupations and not permanent trespassing of some sort.
Exactly. But a lot of campuses didn't handle it very well.
Right.
I feel like we handled it pretty well. I think partly mostly because of our leadership, but also because I think we're a little bit smaller of a university, so a little bit easier to manage. And we had a particular boundaries where they could do their protests. So they couldn't just kind of go in.
You created, not where they created those boundaries.
Right. So it was very thoughtful. And I think that's why we got to graduation and we were able to have a wonderful graduation for.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we did.
Unlike other universities, no.
Yeah.
This is a challenge. I mean, and I think everybody understands not only the times we're in, but the change of things are not like they used to be.
Yeah.
And, across the spectrum. I mean, where have you seen change with your experience in education in the student body, or even in teaching practices? What has changed over the last 20 years that you've seen that way?
That is a really good question. I think more than anything, the greatest change we've seen is after the pandemic, when people were coming back, because there was a short period of time where we were closed. We tried to stay open as long as we could, and we tried to, we provided all sorts of equipment, upgrading all of our audiovisual equipment so that teachers could teach from the classroom, students could zoom into the class during that time period that was very uncertain.
Right.
We really were very committed to getting students the education and keeping them in the classroom or the next best thing for as long as we could, and keeping everyone safe at the same time while we were still in that uncertain time period. But coming back full time, I think has been challenging for universities across the nation, because students who were either coming from high school where they were completely shut down,
right,
which was a tragic situation. The learning loss was at least 2 years. And, some students have had a real hard time catching up. And just the level of engagement is just different. And I think the K-12 system has seen that and knows that overall that was not great. We need to not go there again.
Right. Exactly.
But it's impacted colleges and the way students learn. So what I've tried to do as an instructor, thankfully I have a little bit of a media background, so I kind of knew how to do this more than a regular science professor, for example.
Right.
So I would bring in visuals, I would bring in video, I would try to be interactive and use the chat function for interaction. If I had it, like I did teach a large persuasion class of like more than 250 students because they needed classes
Online.
online
Yeah.
during that time because they needed classes.
Well, but teaching them online versus a big hall, 250 students, that's a lot to teach too. So it might be the same experience to a certain
It is,
extent.
and I had that experience at George Mason because at Chapman, our class sizes are under 25.
Yes.
So it was kind of fun,
Yeah.
but I've just brought in more visuals to engage them as much as I could and just tried to always think about how can I bring them experiential learning opportunities so they could engage and not be passive learners.
Right.
That's the key.
Right.
You've got to get them hands-on involved.
So you think the imprint of COVID on a lot of your students today who were in high school or probably about high school or just entering high school even at the time.
Mhm.
I mean, that imprint of how their education changed so much, they still live with that impact on themselves.
They
right?
do because they weren't able to have as many interpersonal interactions
Right.
with each other in peer learning, but also with their instructors. And so it just created a different environment. I think we're all a little bit challenged by that. And hopefully over time we'll spin out of that. But I think it really hurt that generation of students.
To continue to bring that along. I mean, I live by this theory that during certain formative times in your life, when big events happen, that imprints you and that impacts how you see things for a long time, if not forevermore. I mean, there's a couple studies out, for example, that people who are in their high school or college years during the 2008-2009 cycle, when a lot of people lost their homes, so that value of home ownership that many of us at our generation learned and really lived by is not continued on because a lot of people saw their parents or friends lose their house. So that's why a lot of young professionals today seek apartments as opposed to buying a house and taking on that responsibility. So it's those imprints, I think, are important to see along that line. You know, something else that I certainly saw with my son when he was going to Cal State Long Beach, this whole principle of academic freedom. Why don't you explain that to me? And I know we probably are jumping around, but when I have someone of your caliber here, I want to understand these things. I mean, academic freedom to me was always told that the administration gives the freedom to educators, teachers to be able to present the information as they wish. And, is that how that is? And where the lines are?
Yeah, I mean, the point is you as academics, we need to be able to present our point of view, and it should be grounded in, I believe, it should be grounded and tied to the research, not just an opinion.
Right.
Okay, so there's the difference for me. But academic freedom exists because it allows the pursuit of knowledge without fear of retribution, right? So I can bring in all the controversial research I want to and talk about it in the classroom. Now, when I have my administrator hat on, that changes, right? That academic freedom is not there in the same way than it is when I have my professor hat on and I'm in the classroom, right? And I'm really digging down and touching on various aspects of research that may be controversial. But I think that's what true education, that's what critical thinking really is. It's really unpacking those issues like we touched on a little bit, freedom of speech, getting students to really understand hate speech is free speech. The average person in the public does not understand that.
Right.
And they'll come to our board meetings with the other hat I wear at the Orange County Board of Education, and they'll come and they will condemn hate speech, not understanding that hate speech is free speech.
Right.
So,
but I guess I'm also thinking about where that line of academic freedom, telling a educator, instructor, you can present research information to your students without an impediment from the administration itself or the higher ups. But where do the students have academic freedom? Where is it? Is
they
it
have academic freedom.
Bound by, hey, this is how this teacher wants to present this to you, so you just got to take it.
That's a good point, and it's true. And it is, as a professor, we have that, but the students have the right to express their opinion and push back on an idea that maybe they want to dig further on. They want to present the other view. So when I teach this First Amendment class, the freedom of speech class, I allow them to explore any angle they want to explore.
Right.
And not all professors are like that. A lot of professors will just have sort of one viewpoint. But I very much believe in viewpoint diversity. And I think that's the whole point of creating critical minds in what we should be doing in the classroom. So I do my part.
Yes. Yeah.
But
And you,
yeah,
when you're the overseeing department or the School of Communications, you let those individual instructors do that.
absolutely.
Uh, I don't know. This is one of those things in my craw that dates back over 20 years. No, not that long ago, but when my son was at Cal State Long Beach. But I'm not going to get into the detail. When he was forced to do something that
Yes.
he didn't want to do,
Yeah.
and basically told, this is academic freedom. The instructor can
It is.
make you do whatever you want, or your grade will reflect that.
It is. And the thing is, it actually is, in a way, it's a good exercise for students.
Yeah.
Because they learn how to navigate a system that is putting some barriers in front of their belief system sometimes.
You know what? I really think that's right. I mean, to this day, that imprint, probably might be the only class I'll remember from Long Beach State in a in the area where he wasn't studying. It was one of his electives, right? But to this day, it probably has helped him formulate how to respond to that negative.
Now, it shouldn't affect the grade. That's where the line really should be drawn.
Yes.
Professors can profess and take whatever angle on the topic, bring it whatever research to bear, but the evaluation should be really against some sort of I'm not a big fan of rubrics, so you don't want to just tick off the boxes, because that's where you get away from, I think, critical thinking or critical learning. But there needs to be a fairness in the grading system. It should be based on opinion.
Yes.
It should be based on outcomes.
Right. Okay, I'll drop my personal angst on that one. But really, I want to get back to the School of Communication, because you were sharing with me earlier how with the film school at Chapman that is really getting such great notoriety, you're able to bring some of your communication students and some film students to do a number of documentaries. Why don't you kind of share that international studies on culture and other things through these communication and film school together?
Yes. So, my undergraduate degree was in radio, TV, film. So I have that in my background, and I've always been a big fan of documentary. So I actually have taken a few documentary courses at Chapman as well to kind of, speed up my knowledge on that. And then I've been teaching these courses for the last 10 years with colleagues in the documentary program. And it's been such fun because it was influenced by my early days at University of Oklahoma, where I got to study abroad. And in studying abroad, I lived in Paris, learned French, went to the Sorbonne, passed. It was really hard. But I spent spring break in then Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, but at the time it was still communist.
Yes.
And I was taking pictures because I was taking photography classes at the Parsons School of Design in Paris. And the KGB came into my room and stole my film out of my hotel room, thinking I was some sort of spy or something. Oh. At age 20.
And you weren't.
And I was not.
Oh, okay.
Never been. But that, just observing the communist regime play out in different ways stuck with me, of course. And so I really have always been a big fan of and have training in intercultural communication, and I wanted to provide that opportunity for students however and whenever I can. So this combination of bringing research students from communication, business, science, and pairing them up with documentary students who had that film production experience, and going into a target country and telling stories about the culture. It's just amazing. And our courses have become so popular that we just took a course to Thailand a few months ago, and we had more than 60 applicants for 30 spots.
Wow.
And so we've been to Thailand, we've been to Panama, Bhutan, Nepal, Cuba, Japan, Philippines.
So you take one group with students with this mixed skill set, writing and crafting a message, and then filming it and building a documentary.
Right, putting the story together.
So you said in Thailand you came back with 6?
Yeah, we had 6 documentaries and various kinds of storytelling, from the Muay Thai, which is a special type of martial arts, to the jazz culture in Thailand, to food and culture, which is kind of more obvious, but very colorful, interesting documentaries.
Right.
We focused on a monk and following the monk in his daily life.
Wow.
And it's just cool. And so it gives us, the research students get a little bit of exposure to how to produce a documentary. What is the 3-act structure? And they learn that otherwise they wouldn't have access to in our film school. And the documentary students get access to the research side of things which, they I think need to learn a little bit more about. And so does my documentary professor agrees that this is a great experience for all the students. And so they learn how to work with a team of people with different skill sets and put together a story about that culture.
Yeah.
So it's really fun. It's very intense. So we try to do these courses every 2 years because the preparation for going to the target country is really a lot.
Every 2 years, and you go to all these different countries and
Mhm.
come back with 6 or more
Yeah.
documentaries.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. And that's why I wanted to have you here. Just the breadth of communication and the diversity of communication experience in a university of the caliber of Chapman. But that's not the only education story about you that I know of. And it's that you are an elected official. You are elected to the Orange County Office Department of Education as a board member.
Mhm.
And so tell us about that.
Wow, that's been an experience. I was first recruited to run in 2017 and first elected in 2018, and I was reelected a couple of years ago in 2022. We have been able to approve many charter schools. Back when I first was elected, we only had about a dozen charter schools in Orange County. Now we have, last I know, I think 46 charter schools approved. And that provides school choice
Right.
and parents be able to walk with their feet to the school that really fits the needs of their child. I think my view is that the high tides lift all the boats. And so it helps the district schools to really elevate their programming and offerings for students as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's a win-win for parents of Orange County. And that's why I do this volunteer job on the side. And it has been very rewarding. Parents come up to me all the time and they're just so thankful of the work that we're doing. We're trying to do the right thing. We navigated all of the pandemic as well and really pushed Governor Newsom to open the schools.
See, and I don't think people, so historically, counties in California had county offices of education, but that became the kind of the rural school district, the county schools, until cities grew up and they created separate boundaries and created school districts somewhat around cities. But now those county offices of education remain, and they have some very specific functions. One, caring for students that don't quite fit into an existing school district structure, but also a lot of appeals when local school districts take action. So what you're talking about in charter schools is one of the really critical areas where the county office, you can appeal a decision of chartering a charter school in a school district at a local district, or you could go directly to the county office. But that county office that county board does become that ultimate decision maker.
Yes.
On having a charter school be established or not.
And we primarily are an appellate board, and that is an important function for the voters, for the parents and children of Orange County. So we're appellate board for charter schools, but also for interdistrict transfers.
Right.
And then we approve the budget.
Right.
The budget for the entire county. So that's a very important role we play too.
Yeah.
Really unpacking that budget and really looking at how the sausage is made and how those budgets are carried out and asking important questions around that.
Right. Because the county office also provides legal services to most every school district, provides accounting services or payroll services or a lot of those other things that they can do it. The economies of scale can help the smaller school districts in each county and so forth. So yeah, that county office of education, even though if you do look at my history, you'll probably see a couple legislative bills that I authored to get rid of them. Today, the charter school opportunities and other appellate opportunities, there's so much more, parental aspect where if the local school district doesn't support a decision, you do have someplace to go for that decision.
And I could see why you would have wanted to do that back then, because if they weren't functioning, I could see why they would be looked at as sort of this extra entity that's not really needed. Yeah. But now I do believe we are in the current day performing a very important function that the local school districts may not, but they're being more held accountable. And in a way, when we mostly we vote in favor of the parent because we believe that the parent has the rights to bring up their child and make decisions for their child rather than the school. Right. And And as such, those appeals come to us, and we approve. If a parent has strong, solid arguments of why their child should be in a certain district rather than another, we want to support that parent.
Yeah.
And we want districts to work with each other and not come to us for appeal. And that's happened over time.
Right.
In the beginning, we had a ton of inter-district transfers, and then the patterns continue to play out where they say, oh, well, we need to work together because the county board is going to, unless there's an argument not, which we have turned down a few because,
Right.
the data weren't really there. But if the data's there, we want to support the parent and their decision.
And people may think those are simple things, but I remember when I was mayor, there was a bartender at a local restaurant that came to me tearfully one day, and he said that his son, who lived with him in Anaheim in a one-bedroom apartment, said, my son is registered at his sister's house, the bartender's sister's house in Orange, because he always worked after school, so he wanted his son to be able to go someplace after school.
Yeah.
But then the local district said, no, you can't have your child at a different school district than where you live. So,
Right.
We can all talk about different reasons why people,
Right.
may need to have their children go to different districts or have district transfers. But, that kind of honed very clearly to me, a family struggle and trying to make sure
Absolutely.
you address all the needs of that family.
And we see a lot of that, where the grandparent is able to care for them after, and they live in a different. So we see those stories play out, and that's been really meaningful to be able to help those families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're fascinating. You're so talented and such an asset to the county, but also to Chapman University. So thanks for coming in and sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
Nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you.